as if pulled by ghosts. As requested by the organization, we have performed an in-depth study on the events surrounding the creation of the floaters. Thousands of reported cases have been reviewed, and we have been able to study these events in the field. The study has proved fruitless, and while the data has provided some insights, it has provided no answers. The following contains my personal observations alongside some speculation. While we usually avoid speculation, given the nature of these events, speculation is the only information I can provide. For those of you who have yet to see the event in person, it is a strange sight. Seeing them just float up to the sky, it truly reinforces how terrestrial we are. The panic in their faces as they realize they are no longer walking, their feeble attempts to grasp at anything nearby, the surprising endurance of some while holding on. Their faces shifting to red, then purple, as they strain, trying with all their might to stay on the ground. However, even the mightiest fall eventually. It's random, as far as we can tell, and that's about all we can tell. It defies the very laws of physics. People started carrying ropes and chains to tie themselves down when they felt the event begin. The ropes and chains invariably proved ineffective. It seems the shorter the tether, the sooner it will snap, regardless of material composition or characteristics. Wearing weighted vests apparently has no impact, though we have not been able to study any live examples. We recommend avoiding any interaction with floaters. If someone tries to grab a floater, the rate of ascension doubles. The rescuer also becomes a floater and continues to float after releasing the initial victim. The more people that try to intervene, the quicker they ascend. This also occurs without direct physical contact. Trying to pull them down with a tether also leads to an increased rate of ascension and increases the number of parties floating. The floating parties become affixed to each other, as if glued or bound. Anecdotal evidence shows that cases will only begin outdoors. There are no reported cases having started inside of buildings or under shelter. However, there are well-documented cases where the floater has managed to enter a building before ascending too high. There have been social media video recordings of these events. The cases all end in one of two ways. The floater breaks through the ceiling and continues to ascend. In sturdier buildings, the floater is pushed against the ceiling until their bodies burst under the pressure. The remains continue to experience the floating and spread along the surface of the ceiling. Any non-human matter, for example clothing, shoes, recently ingested food, etc., drops to the floor or ground. Not a single drop of blood, skin cells, or bodily fluids are ever found on the floor or ground. As the remains spread, should a pathway to open air exist, for example a chimney or an air vent, some of the remains will follow this path and continue floating once open air has been reached. Many of the unaffected have been referring to this as the rapture. The chosen float up and join whichever flavor of the month god they happen to believe in. Though anyone with a decent telescope could tell that this is not the case. As an aside, hobbyist astronomy is currently the leading cause of atheism. This raises the question, what is it that they see? It may seem obvious, but the human body is not built to survive high altitudes. Floaters slowly asphyxiate as they rise. They eventually faint. However, not before experiencing the frigid air. Once they meet their end, their ascent slows, and eventually they stop rising. Though they do not descend, they simply remain up there floating. Our extensive studies have revealed almost nothing about these events. The incidences are random, and there's nothing in common between any of the floaters, current or previous, other than the fact that they were all outside. The studies did reveal one other thing. The number of cases is increasing. This, of course, causes great concern, not only for the people affected, but for our nations, our societies, and our economies. All the floaters follow the winds and begin migrating. The floaters then group together. This is causing issues to flights, though bladed catchers are being designed for planes. These catchers help clear the debris that has accumulated, though of course there are drawbacks in terms of flight efficiency, and obviously the process can heavily impact the mental health of the pilots involved. High-resolution images of the different masses show severe bruising and laceration on the victims. At this stage, we would recommend that all cities begin expanding or creating underground transport systems to avoid exposure to open air. To aid in this, military funding should be diverted to develop remote construction and transport technologies. That said, this may all be irrelevant. As previously mentioned, the number of cases is increasing. This, coupled with the fact that the floaters are grouping quicker than we can clear them, is leading to communication issues with satellites and increasingly erratic weather patterns. These weather patterns are impacting radio transmissions, though wired connections still function. However, due to a lack of investment, these wired systems are laggy and suffer from the fact that a significant percentage of our operations are not connected to it. Increase in use has also led to long delays and corrupted information. While we were still able to communicate on a global level, we had advised the world governments to ensure people remain indoors as much as possible, though the ever-increasing number of dark clouds should indicate to all that this has not been successful. Many conspiracy theories have emerged about who is responsible, what the cause is, or whether there is even an issue to begin with. The most dangerous theories come from those who believe that this is the rapture. They continue to meet in large groups, trying to force members to be chosen. Should one begin to rise, as many members as possible jump to initiate their own ascent. This leads to potentially tens of floaters at any given event, if not more. These groups are being closely monitored. Should they discover a means to instigate an event or decide on the next floaters, we will also know. While this may not be the correct platform for my opinion and speculation are all I can provide. Given their nature, I would surmise that the events are random. They appear to be arbitrarily chosen based on the number of people outside. I'm not one for fairy tales, though in these strange times, my mind can't help but wonder. I have taken a shining to one theory, odd as it may be. This theory is based on a superstition. The irony of this is not lost on me, but the things I have seen appear to have made me more susceptible to superstition. The theory speaks of an old story, the origin of which is not known. It tells of a race of gods who would choose individuals and pull them to their realm as a form of ascension. This event was unbelievably rare, and not believed to have occurred in recent lifetimes. However, the theory goes on to state that this fantastical race has either passed away or somehow lost control of the means behind these ascensions. The technology, or possibly magic, now floats freely in our atmosphere, grabbing the victims at random. With no race to pick up these chosen, they simply coalesce in the upper atmosphere. In conclusion, we know very little about what causes the floaters, though we are quite familiar with the side effects. I fear we will not discover anything of use until it is too late. Again, I apologize for the informality of this report. However, it's also intended to serve as my letter of resignation. I feel I'm no longer of use to the organization, and I fear the organization is no longer of use to the world. I freely admit to having been caught in the hysteria. I do not know much about these events, but I know I do not wish to leave the house.